Hey everybody, I hope you guys are doing good today. Welcome back to, I think the title is Game Theory Talks on Poker, something like that. Oh, it's nice to have you all here. Thank you for joining me. So I wanted to say some of the applications of game theory go far beyond just poker. During the Cold War, the United States and Russia, I think it was called the Soviet Union at that point, basically had a nuclear arms race. And behind the idea, these superpowers had enough nuclear weapons to destroy each other entirely. So the the strategic application of game theory basically shows that neither side would initiate a nuclear attack because they would be very afraid of the other side shooting back. You could call this like a retaliation, and it would probably trigger a very devastating retaliation because they're nuclear weapons. So there's a very delicate balance in game theory, and it's all based on rational decision making, which is based on models. Well, actually, it's based on our own intelligence. But game theory gives us some models, some principles that we can start to think about individually and see how they apply to a broader spectrum of decisions. And really, poker, this is the greatest place for it. You cannot learn game theory in Pio Solver. You can only learn game theory through understanding it from first principle, understanding the foundation and the ideas. And one does not necessarily have to go off of the table and do this. One can actually listen to videos. And that can be very powerful if they understand the idea already at some level, and videos explain the concepts well in a very articulate manner. This can be very, very, very powerful. But these rational decisions that we make need to come from the framework of game theory. At least we need to have that in our toolbox. And in fact, it should come from our overall schema. They cannot be separate from this idea of or doing this exploitative thing. There's no separation between these two things. These are just different ideas that arise when we are making a decision. And these principles are the principles that you could say helped prevent direct confrontation between two nations that had nuclear weapons. So these principles are timeless. And in fact, they're very, very good in poker. Now, the thing that I was saying before did not, it did not showcase two poker players at a table. However, there is a lot of real world, but more importantly, poker application of game theory that has a profound influence on the strategic implications of ourselves and our opponent. It gives us a completely different framework to view this game holistically and not think on a street by street basis, not think over a few extra streets, but understand the entirety of the game. So we can always discuss something like the Cold War and the game theory principles, and I might give some examples in talks of game theory, not just from the poker perspective, but often poker players become very identified with only poker, but of course poker exists in our mind, right? Poker is a collection of, it's our knowledge, it's our past knowledge, which is stored in a memory within ourselves. So I like to think about game theory from a much more holistic perspective, not only poker, because it allows us to make more connections and then understand the underlying principles like equilibrium. Because equilibrium is not a concept that simply comes from poker. If we understand the concept of equilibrium in a market, if we understand the concept of equilibrium in nature with different chemicals, it is the same concept applied to poker. So making different connections outside of poker, and this has been done in psychology, neuroscience is now saying that this is absolutely the case. Da Vinci said that this was one of the best methods to be able to study different methods, and Da Vinci was an absolute genius. He was one of the greatest artists who's ever lived, and in addition to him being one of the greatest artists who's ever lived, he also was one of the greatest scientists, and he helped us create models And he drew models of what was inside of the human body, of what was inside of nature. We've never had such in-depth pictures of autopsies done 500 years ago. Absolutely astonishing what Da Vinci was able to do. So we are able to translate these different events and think about game theory from a variety of perspectives, because game theory is simply about modeling the incentives for strategic options, say different bets, and what the implications and consequences are of playing, saying dominated strategies, using game trees that are not good, doing certain things at a frequency too high or too low in this situation. It's all encompassing, but it's not something that we are remembering to increase our knowledge. We simply have to allow these ideas to envelop our current understanding and to merge with our already very strong game, our already very well thought out game. It becomes closer to being one. So today I want to be discussing the concept of equilibrium. And I want to discuss poker theory from first principles. And I want to try to make an argument for why it's important to study poker in this manner and not simply buy software called PioSolver, put different situations into PioSolver that model a real game situation, and try to draw ideas from PioSolver based on our current understanding, if we do not already have a game theoretical framework from which we are viewing things. I want to talk about also why studying PioSolver without understanding a proper framework for what the meaning of different bets are, because what does a solver say? It's not like a solver says anything. Our brain creates the meaning. The solver is doing this because of that. No, the solver doesn't do anything because of anything, because cause and effect is a convention of the human mind. A solver is a robot. It is an algorithm. So there is no cause and effect. The problem is that when the human mind views different things, if it's not very connected and not very conscious, the human mind has a very hard time experiencing or creating models of even objects that are not human beings, like computers, in a way where cause and effect does not actually, where it's not the frame in which things happen, because cause and effect obviously is not real. It is a model that we create, which is a way that we can talk about concepts. We can model reality. It is basically a set of rules. We say the interaction of X and Y or G. Logic is basically a set of rules. But actually in reality, poker is life. Everything is mutually arising. This is reality. This is the ultimate perspective. So it's very, very, very important for us to be able to create a framework in which we allow certain things that we are viewing on the solver to be true. And if you are interested in time efficiency, then this is certainly your way to go. If you're interested in just clicking buttons like a factory worker 12 hours a day and making your ends meet, then you're probably not a very efficient or intelligent human being. I'm very sorry that that's the case. I think that this society is incredibly cruel and you should not have to do that. I think we can make advancements in technology, so if you don't have a particularly high IQ, you should be able to just sit on your sofa and watch television, and we can have robots do most of the stuff for us. So it's not a moral thing, but unfortunately you will not have the capacity to do well in poker. I'm very sorry. But I believe that the number of people that play poker currently annually more than once a month is over 50 million. That is a big number. It could even be upwards of 100 million depending on how you define playing poker, the frequency of poker. Because some people, they may not play for a few months, but then they go to a casino and they go every day for 3 weeks. So how do you define this? You could say even 100 million people play poker worldwide. Okay? And only 2% or 3% of these people actually make enough money in the country that they live in to make a living relative to their expenses. So, in fact, it's a very challenging game to be able to make a living at. And because of these facts, the majority of people who are going to spend the time to watch a game theory series of videos and its application to poker are already going to be very, very, very intelligent. But it's extremely important to understand just how deep this game is, because there is an idea that I can go into a solver, and because I am in a solver and my brain says the solver does this because of this, the solver does that because of that, this is the reason why. No, solvers, there is no solver, there is only you. And you are using a machine that has an algorithm that does not possess a why, because why is non-existential. Why is a creation of the human brain. Algorithms do not have whys because strategies mutually arise. They don't have this capacity. The problem is that the human brain cannot see itself. The eye cannot see the eye. Notice is you might be in front of your computer and you might think about yourself as if you know something about yourself. But remember that if you are very logical, you will realize that your 5% perceptions have sight. This is one way you access reality. You're looking in front of you. The only way that you can see yourself is if you imagine yourself or you go in front of a mirror. You cannot directly know yourself in terms of your self-image, right? So the brain is very, very, very intelligent. In fact, the brain is absolutely intelligent because when we say this is me, it's not like we can touch this model of ourself. We say this me has personality traits, but we don't have the capacity to touch them, to taste them, to feel them, to hear them, to see them. Even though we say this is concept of me, it's obviously created by our memory, by our mind, and superimposed on top of reality. Because we cannot access these traits through our 5 sense perceptions. This is just very basic logic. Any psychologist, any physicist, any mathematician would agree. Anybody that uses logic. The reason why I say this is because when we are playing poker, our brain, for survival, does not actually necessarily favor truth. It often favors fitness. And this has been proven in evolutionary game theory. And I will be talking about this in the future very often. For the moment, I want to basically speak about why the concept of equilibrium is so important to understand. And it is the foundation for all of the other talks. Poker is absolutely infinitely complex. As far as poker's complexity, it is such a fucking massive game that we're playing 10 to the 161st different decision points, which is more fucking atoms in the entire universe. So we were working with a very, very, very complex game. And our brain very often believes that we have the capacity to know what a right or a wrong decision is. And this is not something that is within the nature of reality that we have access to. This can only be imagined by us. And if we don't understand how this can only be imagined, then we do not understand what it means to know something and what it means to not know something. In the ultimate truth, the only true knowledge that we can have is of ourself, because we can never know the object of knowledge. Yes, we can say that is a tree, but we are not the tree, so we can collect facts about the tree. This is absolutely fundamental to understanding poker, because this is what cuts through all the bullshit when it comes to misinterpretations of the application of game theory. The problem is that it's very difficult to understand that things mutually arise in reality and poker. Now, I want to talk about this because this is absolutely at the crux of the issue. So, in fact, maybe we won't even talk about equilibrium. Maybe we will not have time. Maybe we'll talk about it a little bit, but it's very important to understand and create a framework in which things happen to be the case. And the education system has done a very poor job at helping poker players, and we have to retrain our minds. It certainly will hurt our ego, but we are already so intelligent that we do not have time for our ego. Obviously, if we had our ego, we would be like recreational players. We would not be able to make a living. So, human cognition has had a very hard time understanding the complexities of the human brain and being able to comprehend the interconnectedness of life, of, or you could say, phenomenon. I would not say life, it's a little bit less scientific. We should say the interconnectedness of phenomenon, because the brain has been trained through the education system to think on a very simplistic cause and effect model to basically make a very safe feeling for us in our sense of self in the world. However, this reductionist strategy is not actually good for a poker strategist. In fact, this is a very dangerous approach when we start to solve poker problems, because it really overlooks the nuanced nature of poker. It overlooks the fact that we need to expand our mind to be able to perceive the holistic picture. There is certainly an inherent challenge in comprehending mutually arising, but this is because of the education system's reinforcement in linear thinking. So I do want to talk about the utility of cause and effect, but only as a utility. It certainly is not something that we can use very deeply when it comes to strategic thinking. And this kind of pervasive limitation of the human mind to always miss the forest for the trees. Think about that analogy. It's very important. Do not miss that. This pervasive limitation of the mind to miss the forest for the trees. So we have to understand what mutually arising means, because it is the only reality in which we can think about poker, and it involves an expanded mind. You cannot think about game theory and Pio Solver without an expanded mind. If you are using the same mind of the education system in terms of A, B, C, or D, then you do not understand reality, and you certainly will not be a Napoleon. You certainly will not be a Genghis Khan. You certainly will not be an Albert Einstein. You certainly will not be a George Washington. You are not a strategist. You are not an Alexander the Great. But you can be. You can absolutely be. But what it takes a willingness to expand one's mind to be able to think about things in terms of mutually arising and get out of this very oversimplistic game that we play with ourselves to make ourselves feel better. This is because of that. End of story. If you ask a physicist, you cannot solve any problems in this way. If you ask a real game theorist, you cannot solve any problems in this way. The concept of interdependence basically proposes that phenomena arises in dependence on mutual causes. It's not one thing. This, because of that. No. In fact, There are multiple conditions in which there can be multiple causes rather than a single linear one-dimensional cause. But the brain, the Homo sapien brain, models reality in a way that makes it feel safe, because reality is very complex and there's nothing that we have to cling on to. So this interconnectedness really challenges the mind's predisposition to linear thinking, which wants to seek a very clear, crystal positive causal relationship. This is why it votes for politicians that scream certainty but don't know what the fuck they're talking about. Politicians are often much less intelligent than any musician that you hear on the radio, than any artist's work that you see. The problem is that the society pays for bombs and pays for war. It doesn't pay for art. It doesn't pay for music in the same way. It doesn't pay for poetry in the same way. So in order to actually understand game theory, you have to go beyond being a slave of society and thinking in terms of cause and effect. And I'm sure that most of the poker players are far more intelligent than to believe what they are told. I'm sure that they question everything that they're told and continue to try to make new connections and realize that cause and effect also is the same as conflict solution. And there are no conflicts in poker and there are no solutions in poker. So the part of our brain that always tries to find a conflict and spray out a solution, put out this fire, actually this has to be also understood to be an illusion as well. So the brain tends to simplify very complex systems into linear sequences because it's difficult to look at the intricate web of interactions that underpin reality, because then it makes the sense of self, that I feel unsafe when I think about all the things that can give me anxiety when I play poker, so I'm just going to make it into one-dimensional thinking. Actually, this is not the way to play poker. And I'll give you an example. Basically, in the ecological system, or the health of the ecosystem, this emerges basically from the interplay of a variety of factors such as biodiversity and weather and human activity and whatever. This is very, very complex shit. So you want to say this is because of that? Well, this does not exist. This because of that, right? These are just words, and they lead to another model that we have in our head. And then this because of that is a great synthesis predicated on quadrillions of presuppositions. So then in order to actually understand this because of that, we have to break down these presuppositions from first principle. The problem is that our cognitive bias, or what they would say in spirituality, the ego, this often tries to reduce complexity into a singular cause, like everything was made because of God. Or in the scientist's perspective, everything was made because of the Big Bang. And yes, that's probably much more realistic. But of course, when we were here 300 years ago, we were also sure that Isaac Newton was absolutely correct, until a brilliant man named Einstein proved relativity, and then Newton was incorrect. So we can never be sure of ourselves right now. The problem is that the brain always wants to be sure of itself right now, and it hurts the sense of self when we realize that actually things mutually arise. There's no cause and effect, so we cannot even be sure of our systems today, because we are not so stupid. 300 years ago, they were so sure of themselves, and actually they were very stupid to be sure of themselves. Now today, I hope we are not so stupid. I think we have taken many lessons from history and we can apply it to game theory. And it's not only mathematics, it's also understanding that we cannot be so egoistic. We have to be very, I don't like to use the word humble, because often that word is to do with how we are perceived by others, and then kind of manipulating our language to be perceived as a humble person. I don't mean that. I'm specifically saying that we cannot be too sure of ourselves. Okay, so anyways, basically this pervasive reinforcement of linear thinking throughout thousands of years of our history now, in our education system and society, basically fosters a myopic view that you could say obscures the very big picture, but we try to narrow this picture. And then individual people become very entranced in analyzing one isolated component of the society, like this very, like, it is a very big thing in their life. But they think that, like, one bill, moving one bill, like, you should tax smoking, this is the most important thing, compared to making sure that, like, everybody has enough food and that we don't have homeless people in the street. The brain has a very hard time, like, prioritizing what's important. It's so sad. It's really just unbelievably sad that, like, I mean, I laugh, but only at my own stupidity, because I have the same problem. I'm not any different. Because sometimes I get angry and I'm like, these motherfuckers tax cigarettes. I'm gonna vote no. This is the most important thing. I want cheap cigarettes. But then, like, you know, I don't give a fuck about, like, voting for, like, prop whatever that's gonna, like, help school children get whatever. It's not because I don't care, but it's because, like, the problems in my mind that are important have to do with, I actually don't smoke cigarettes, but I was just trying to give an example that's, like, relatable. You know, I totally get it. You know? I mean, even though I don't smoke, you know what I mean? Like, I'm like, when I've got like a hooker when I only have like $200 in the bank and I gotta pay rent. I'm just like, damn, man, I gotta get laid. So, like, I get it, you know? But unfortunately, like, this part of myself that does not know how to make decisions, it's very, very important that we actually. Okay. I maybe need to pause because this got very funny. Okay. Sorry, I'm calming down. So, this narrow focus impedes our ability to address, like, a very, like, systematic issue and then anticipate these sort of unintended consequences of the system. So, for instance, there are African American people that say, I want reparations for everything that happened, and then there are bills like affirmative action, and then there are people that are like, no, these African American peoples were not slaves. That was a long time ago. It doesn't matter. Fuck them. I don't want to lose what I have. And then there's the other. I'm not on their side or against them. I really don't give a fuck. I'm just trying to, like, give this perspective of like even though these people were taken from their islands, sold by their own people to people that became Americans, used as slaves against their will for generations and generations, completely broken, so inhumane. It's like we spend $2 trillion a year on, maybe multiple more $1 trillion a year on war, but then we have, like, people sleeping in the street of all different races, of all different genders, of, like, you know, that's the kind of shit where, like, we don't necessarily know how to prioritize things that are important. We spend $2 trillion a year on the military, and then we've got people in Africa that don't even fucking have food and water. Right? This is like I'm like, this is really crazy shit. It's just the way that we prioritize things, and it's because of linear thinking, and it's because of the way that the ordinary mind thinks in cause and effect. So, unfortunately, solutions to multifaceted problems often fall short, and it basically perpetuates, like, these kind of cycles of crisis and intervention, and they don't really like, address the underlying systematic dysfunctions or the root causes. And this is basically what I want to be talking about. The human brain's inclination toward linear thinking, coupled with, like, the reinforcement of, like, very simplistic cause and effect models, creates, like, serious barriers to the poker player that is coming to the video and wanting to be a good strategist. And I want to give everybody as much information as possible so we know what cognitive biases to actually look out for, because I believe that all of us, I mean, I don't know, maybe you or you know some people that may be an exception, but I am definitely not an exception. I'm probably much more degenerate and messed up than most people that I know. I'm not sure if that's because I'm a poker player and I like hookers, or if that's because I just am a human being. I mean, I'd like to think it's because I'm a poker player, because that sounds way more cool. But I don't know. I mean, linear thinking does offer some kind of, like, practical utility in navigating, like, life. but like we cannot have it in terms of like our holistic poker view, because it completely obscures like interconnected phenomena, different nodes, webs of a game tree. And basically, to actually transcend this limitation, we need to actually reevaluate the educational paradigms that we were sort of forced into having or shoved down our throats by the education system. I think this very like interdisciplinary learning and critical thinking uh, approach rather than rote memorization is really important. And this is why we need a first principles approach to everything that we take. So I'm going to pause this. I'll think about what else to say. Well, actually, I was hoping to make this episode about 40 or 45 minutes and then go into Nash equilibrium, but then I just went on a whole bunch of rants for like half an hour. I'm so sorry. Oh, it was a little bit silly. But yeah, I'm just going to make this a talk number two. And then the next talk, I will very likely talk about Nash equilibrium. So sorry for all of that. Please forgive me. I hope you guys don't not like me. Uh, or I hope you guys like me. Yeah. So, okay. I love you all. Well, goodbye.